nothing but God. He can do all things. To him, honor and glory, to me, the eternal reward. And I just wanted to repeat that theme that we had from Father Guido, that we started with the very first session. And everywhere and always, it is Jesus who lives in you. He wants to think in you. He wants to desire in you. He wants to love in you and to give of himself by means of you. And we know well that this is the one thing that counts. And of course, we can change that you to me everywhere and always. It's Jesus who lives in me. He wants to think in me, to desire in me, to love in me, and to give of himself by means of me. So that's quite a challenge. I mean, that's our everyday duties. And it's not impossible, because Jesus said he would, you can't do anything by yourself, but me with you, with myself rather, Jesus says, you can do all things. So he puts a lot of faith in that. Let's see. So we're called to be light to our brothers and sisters. And El Barioni always wants us to work for our sanctification. And that's what sustains our religious life as such consecrated people. We're invited to take up once again the search for the one thing, which is our sanctification, because Jesus lives in us. That's sanctification. And so we have to go in our poverty to God. It's like Moses, he took off his shoes when God was talking to him. So we don't have to take off our shoes literally, but we spiritually do that. We go on our bare feet because we're meeting God. And we have to enter to the heart of our Pauline charism. And that heart is a person. It's Jesus Christ, the way, truth, and life. And we're called as Paulines through our example, some of us through our apostolate, to give Jesus way, truth, and life to the whole world. And it's the reason why we're here, whether we phrase it like that or not when you join the institutes. And the phrase Jesus, Master, Way, Truth, and Life is really a program of life, because the way, truth, and life encompasses our whole being, our minds, our will, our heart, our senses, and all our work. So we have to let Jesus live in us so that we're saturated with him, so we can serve the people today. So it's our spirituality is totally Christ-centered, and he has to penetrate our whole being. And I don't know if we examine ourselves on that or not, because sometimes we have to let Jesus take over, but we don't always give him the wiggle room to do that, because we're filling our minds and hearts with our daily struggles, problems at work, or health problems, or something in your family, your parents, or siblings. Those are things that can crowd out our room for Jesus. So we have to give him more space. And it's a temptation to get stuck on other things and forget about God. Because, one thing about it, if you've ever gone to a Jesuit for confession or spiritual direction, they'll always ask you, if you're talking about a situation you were in, and they'll say, well, where was Jesus there? Where did you find Jesus in that situation? And sometimes I really have to admit that I wasn't thinking about Jesus being present there, because, don't always remember that he's the prime mover of my life. And but sometimes I think I'm the prime mover, because I'm used to being my own boss when it comes to the spiritual life. And it's it's not the way it should be, because Jesus is the way to follow. And if I'm trying to do things on my own, it doesn't work. So, and that's what the founder gave us, that book, Until Christ Be Formed in You, Don't Act for Nature. And that's really our charism in a nutshell, so in the book, because that's for every Pauline, whether they're in a cloister or convent or in the world like yourselves. So when we're making this retreat, here's some suggestions. That we enter this by giving our all to Him, our hopes, our joys, our difficulties, our sufferings, disillusionments, problems, and bring everything into this retreat. Nothing of your life should remain outside. So the whole you, the whole me, have to enter with all my great fears, our failings, our fantasies, our reason, and with the intentions and motivations that keep you going. You know, and even any bitterness that we might have, we can take it and then get rid of it. So nothing of us must remain outside this space with God in you. And so remain alone with God as much as you can, because I don't know if any of you got off of work because of this. I hope so. Or if you didn't, if you're able to keep a silence, because I don't know if I used that example of a hunter. I know I had it, and I don't know if I actually said it, because there's one of our authors. He's a great preacher. I heard him in Father Bransfield. He lives in Washington and works with the U.S. bishops, but he likes to use that simile of a hunter who's I think I mentioned by my sister and her two adult children. They went hunting this past hunting season in Canada, and they each got a bear. You know, and now they have 3 new bear rugs in their house. But the idea of hunting is that you can't be talking to each other or listening to the radio or anything. You have to be silent, because the animals that have super fine senses, and they can smell things we can't. They can hear stuff we can't. So that's what we have to, when we're hunting for something, some animal, we have to keep very silent. Otherwise, we get home empty-handed. So, but that's the same with the spiritual life, because if we want to find God, we got to keep quiet and shut off the distractions, because it's so easy to be distracted, to turn on the TV, pick up the newspaper, whatever it be, you know, and that can bring our minds and heart away, and also add to our worries, because usually every day the newspaper has the bad stuff. Usually, not always, but it's really that focus that we need now. And hopefully you'll have the Holy Spirit will renew you and reform you, because I hate to use the word reformatory, because that was, when we were kids, they said if you were bad, you had to go to reformatory, and that had a bad connotation. But to be reformed spiritually is a good thing. So, and the Spirit will find, if he finds us docile instruments, then he can fix us up. He can add to our spiritual life. He can get rid of stuff that's baggage for us. And it's not so much what I do, it's what God wants to do in me. And to seek peace from the intellectual level, so that, you know, we have to move from the intellect to intuition, because, you know, sometimes we try to think and bury our heads, but sometimes the grace of God can hit us. All of a sudden, you know, we're trying to think of some virtue or the solution to some relational problem, and you think about it, but you pray about it, and then the answer comes. And sometimes it comes really unexpectedly. And I know it's happened to me, because sometimes there could be some people that have a more abrasive personality or whatever, and you're afraid that it's hard to approach them because it seems like they'll fly off the handle or whatever. But with a lot of prayer and bringing that person to prayer can really open doors for us and open relationships that I find it pretty hard. So that's one of the things we have to ask Jesus for, is to help us in our relations with others, but to help us first of all with our relation with ourselves. That we have to make an examination of conscience every day, and many times some of the spiritual writers say we should do it a couple of times a day, at noontime, before we go to bed. But one spiritual writer says it's not so good to do it before we go to bed, because if you see something negative, it doesn't help us sleep. So it's better to make the exam, like after supper or before supper, and rather than just hang out, wait till bedtime, because we want to go to bed in peace with Christ. Yeah, let's see. I'm looking at what revelations are here. Yeah, as I said, you can, many times when we get a special grace from God, it's not so much it's hitting us in our mind, it's hitting our heart. And when we get graces, it's coming from Jesus, Master, in the Eucharist. So the founder always lived this intense spiritual life, and also an intense apostolic life, because he didn't want us, especially in the groups that the founder started for apostolic work. He never wanted us to slack off. If there was a new way of doing things, a better way, he was after us to do that, to reach that. So when the sisters started, they were only into printing and in the books, bringing the books door to door. And now we've moved to not only the printing, we used to do it ourselves, but now we send it out because it's faster that way. And in this way, it frees up sisters so they're not tied to a printing machine. They can be writing, or they can be in the book center, or doing something else. So that's when you think of the founder, he lived in turbulent years, because 1914 was the beginning of the First World War in Europe. That's when the assassination that caused it happened. And then, it was a very hard time, but the founder was able to see beyond these wars and upheavals politically. He was looking for what God wanted, what was needed to spread the gospel. And it really made him a stronger person. And he had one trouble after the other, because, in Alba, they called him Alberione Imbroglione, because imbroglio is a mess, it's somebody who stirs up the pot and gets into trouble. And that's what they called Alberione, because they didn't understand what this young priest was doing. He had this ragtag group of young men, young boys, and the only adult was with them was Father Ciccardo, Blessed Timothy. So, and he had a very primitive printing presses. So that there was all kinds of problems, but he had the goal in mind to use this press, use the media of the day to get out the good news of the gospel. So he started the Gazette of Alba, the Catholic paper, but for the Diocese of Alba. It was I think it was already in existence, but it was ready to shut down until he got it. And that was his first foray into using media, was the Gazette of Alba, the Catholic paper. And now that even today, when the last time I went to Alba, you drive into town, there were these kiosks with the Catholic paper. It says from 1914 until now, it's been thriving because Alberiani gave it a big push. And it's in the beginning, he used to edit it himself, and it would cover not only the things of the faith, but also when to start your planting and all the things that farmers needed to know, because most of the people in that diocese were farmers, and still are. He wasn't always like this. When he was in a junior seminary, he got kicked out. He was sent home. And we don't know why, but some people say he was reading books that got him all mixed up. Or that's because we know he had a hot temper. So they didn't really put the reason down while they told him to leave. But that's when that was in a different diocese. It's the same seminary that St. John Bosco went to. But somebody told him, you got to go to Alba. And that was the grace of God, because in Alba, he met a spiritual director who really turned him around, because from that time on, he became much more fervent. And he also had a good friend who was a very holy young man. And that friend died. I think they were like 17 or 18, and he passed away. And that's really was another incentive for Alberiani to become a saint and to do something great for God. And that's in that beginning of the congregation. That's when he was devoted to Mary, the Immaculate Conception, and he was devoted to Jesus, Sacred Heart. But then after that fellow died, he got this inspiration more and more to follow Jesus' way, truth, and light. And he understood that words come to me, because if you go to Alba, in the Church of the Divine Master that the founder started, it's really in it's in the Cathedral of Alba. And that's where the founder, as a seminarian, spent those 4 hours in prolonged prayer and received the inspiration to begin the Pauline family. So the tabernacle there has the words, "Let me come to me." And that's impressed on him for the rest of his life, that we should go to Jesus in the Eucharist. And he went with all his being to Jesus in the Holy Eucharist. And that's where he really got on fire with love for God and for souls. And it was like through hell and high water he went through, but he got it because he had like people calling him crazy because he had no money, and all these kids, they were just young teenagers, if they were teenagers yet. And they were just learning how to print, because actually nowadays a lot of their printing is sent out to regular printing companies. That in the beginning, they say that that's a characteristic of the Piedmontese people, the people who live in northern Italy, way up north, and they've always wanted to do stuff on their own, to be self-sufficient, and that was one of Primo's, the founder's characteristics. And he felt in his heart the desires of the heart of Jesus, that all would come to Christ. And he had this total outlook. Everybody should be called to take part in the sacraments in the life of Jesus. And he felt that in the depths of his being, that need for Christ. And that's something that we want to learn from, because that's a very Pauline characteristic, because St. Paul said, it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So the founder, I think he really reached that goal, even though he had his, like anybody else, he had his defects in that too, but he actually worked on them a lot. And he was very ascetical. And a few times he made, about 3 or 4 times, he made a 30-day retreat. And most of the time when he had that retreat, he stayed in his own little room, and all he had to eat was beans, didn't want anything else. And so he made those mortifications of not, having other stuff to eat. And he seemed focused on his own soul and on the needs of the congregation. So in the very beginning, there was also a fire in the topography. It was burned a lot of the machines. And in the beginning, they lost 2 of our founding people. Margarino, who was a teenager, he was on fire with the Pauline spirit. He used the media for God. And Clelia was the daughter of St. Paul, and she died young too. So it seemed like in the beginning, everything seemed to be going wrong. But God, there's that motto in Romans 8:28, for those who love God, everything works together for the good. And in the end, it does work out, but while it's happening, it's hard to see that. So, and he tells us, and we're very small compared to all the needs of the world. Pauline family's kind of a pin drop there, because there's millions, billions of people, and we haven't reached that many yet. So we have to feel ourselves very small. So we can't count on ourselves, but we have to count on Jesus. And those words in our chapels, and I am with you, fear not, I want to enlighten. That goes for everybody, for you all, because Jesus promised that I will not leave you orphans. He said, I'll be with you. And he does give us what we need. When I was in high school, there was, I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, and we had in our city, we had a lot of people who were exiles or refugees from Eastern Europe, which had been, and still some of it is still today, under communist rule. And one of the priests that we had in our school, he was a Mary priest. He was an Eastern Rite priest, and I forgot what country. I think he was in Czechoslovakia, and he was hunted down because he was a priest. So he tried to go in disguise, and for a long time he was able to do his ministry in hiding. And he said if he felt that there were secret police behind him, he'd pull out a cigarette and put his arm around a lady, and just fake it. And he did all kinds of things to elude the cops. But then one day he was imprisoned for 13 years. And then, when he was in prison, he said it was pretty awful, because I think they had these bunk beds that were, I think, 6 guys high, and the higher you went, the worse it was, because they weren't available to have baths and all that every day, so it's pretty stinky, and so that was a big sacrifice. But he was also brought to trial, and again he said, this is the gospel that says, Jesus says, don't fear about what you're going to say, because it's going to be given to you. And he doesn't remember what he said when he was put on trial. But when he was in the prison, they got a new prisoner one day, and the prisoner walked up to him and said, I'm here because of you. And he wasn't accusing him of anything. He said, it's because you touched my heart. When I heard what you said to the judge, how convincing you were, you convinced me too. So he had given up communism and was made a prisoner, like this priest was because of the words of the priest, which he says, I don't remember what I said, but the Holy Spirit, inspired him to say whatever it was when he at his trial. So those things are real. They really happen today, and I'm sure they're happening all over. Because the other day I was very touched because remember, I think a year ago there was over 100 young people, they're young men, I think they're from Ethiopia, but they were Christian. And there was one guy that with them who died with them because they were all beheaded by the Muslims there. And but to me, they're all martyrs of today because none of them gave up their faith. They all professed in Jesus. So that happens now too, just like it happened back in the time of Jesus and in the founder's time. And then in the beginning, the founder was in 1920, I think it was 21, he was dying. One of our sisters was sent to help him to be his nurse. And then one day he says, we have to get up and go into Alba. And he was cured just like that. So, his sister couldn't believe that. He was ready to get out of bed because he couldn't even hold his prayer book. He was so sick before. Said that even the diocese was against him. And only the bishop and Canon Chiesa, who was his spiritual director, they understood him, and backed up his idea of apostolate to use the press. And he had big debts to pay, and they one day that they were one of the people that he owed money to said, I'm going to put you in jail because unless you pay this bill. And he said, well, that's fine because this way I'll get 3 meals a day. Otherwise, I don't have anything to eat. So, but the founder wasn't afraid of anything. So because the Lord appeared to him in a dream, and he pointed to the tabernacle and says, from here I will cast light. So the same with us. Whenever we have problems, even if we don't have problems, we need the light of Jesus to imitate him, to live his life day by day. And also those letters in our chapel say, have a penitent heart, be sorry for sin. So it's living in continual conversion. And we can never say to ourselves, well, I got it made now. I made a good confession, I'm okay, and I'm going to be a saint no matter what. And then next thing you know, we fall on our face spiritually. But God is there to pick us up. So that's what we have to keep praying, that by myself I can't do nothing, but with God I can do all things. In the old prayer book, it's on page 211. Now I think it's 212. In the new prayer book, there is the pact with the Lord, secret of success. It really is the secret of success because that's what we tell God. We actually enumerate the things that are wrong with us, like we're ignorant, incapable, and lacking in all things. We tell God that, but we also say, I'm counting on you, God, to fill the blanks in and give me what I need, what all of us need to do your will. So there's going back in the life of the founder, there's so many things like that happened that really were miraculous in many places. So I got lost here in talking about the founder because to me it's kind of inflames his love of the apostolate, because having met the founder, because he always looked like he was being swallowed up by his collar, because he had scoliosis of the spine, so his head was kind of bent forward, and he looked so thin, and that again, he was full of enthusiasm. Because like I mentioned before, that I had the grace to meet him when I was a junior professor, and I got his blessing, and I was very pleased that I was able to meet him. And he wasn't scary at all. I was afraid he would be real scary because being the founder and Father General and all that. And I had never met a living saint before. At least I didn't think I did. As I met Mother Tekla, and I think she was a living saint too. But he's the first priest I met that was famous for being a saint, and that was kind of scary. But he, his blessing really helped me. And the fact that he actually laughed in my presence was kind of consoling too, because he did what I said. He gave me this blessing on my head, as I mentioned. But he also he gives in the book Donec Formator Christus and Vobis, until Christ be formed in you. He keeps telling us there at least 3 times, Jesus, the formation in Christ is mentioned there. We had to put on Christ, we had to be Christ. And Paul speaks of a profound transformation, because on the way to Damascus, all of a sudden, he gets up believing in this Jesus. Because he said, "Who are you?" And it was Jesus talking to him. It took him 3 days to be able to talk again, and then Ananias came to baptize him. But it's when we have in our Pauline family, we have Jesus, Master, Way, Truth, and Life, and we have Saint Paul as the model, our teacher, and it's something we should do on a daily basis if we can. Is to read a piece of the letters of Paul and to digest them, so that we actually think according to the gospel. Because Paul was preaching the gospel. He says, I've talked about Jesus. Since he got to know Jesus there on the way to Damascus, he was never stopped talking about him. And in fact, he started doing it right away, and he had to leave town in a basket, lowered down in ropes with the basket outside the walls. So, but Paul, nothing scared him away from preaching. So we shouldn't be scared either, because there are God opens doors for us, ways to evangelize, ways to invite somebody to the faith, or to come with us to Mass, or if they need to know more about Catholicism, you can get a book from the Daughters or other bookstores. But you have ways and means to reach out to people, but your first outreach is yourself and myself. If we smile, or you don't have to be grinning all the time, but we do to smile at people, and we don't look cranky, because everyone, as a young sister, my companions and I would say, we don't want to grow up, get old and become cranky old nuns. We don't want to do that. So we don't want to be cranky old Catholic men and women. So consecrated, because people don't know we're consecrated, but we know, and God knows, and they should catch on something because of the way we act. But if we go around with a long face or angry, it's counterintuitive. It's not preaching the gospel. It's tearing down the gospel. So we have to remember that, and when we receive communion in the morning, ask Jesus to be the one who's going to talk for us, who's going to think for us, act for us. Give him that freedom to do that. So I think, I haven't looked at my clock. Oh, I think I'm going to say good evening, but I hope to see you tomorrow and more on time, because it's really frustrating when I can't get my computer in sync with the rest of you. But thanks for your patience. You've been very patient with me, very kind. So thank you very much for listening. And I show you up my prayers, and I have all the senior sisters praying for you too. And I hope you're feeling it. God bless you and good night. Good
Thank
evening.
you, Sister Mary Peter. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm gonna put on the things like you did today, right?
Pardon me, you gotta say it louder.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'll make
oh,
sure it goes on to YouTube.
No, I'm talking about the links. You'll put the links on?
That's going to be the
I-
same ones for tomorrow that were today's.
To work
So go
tomorrow
for the
too.
morning-
Yeah,
then do
they'll
the
work all week.
Morning one
Alright.
and then, boom.
The
Yeah.
afternoon one.
Great. Thank you very much.
Hmm
Bye.
Bye-bye, y'all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.